We'd like to thank Montecito Bank and Trust for their generous support in making Scam Squad possible.
Sound off.
1, 2.
Sound off.
3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Scam Squad.
Welcome to Scam Squad. I'm Patty Teal, and we've got Gregory Hons here today. We're so happy to have him, and while Christina's out of town, and I can't wait to hear what he has to tell us about today.
Hey, Patty. Good. Thanks for having me, and hope your new year is off to a great start.
Yeah, so far so good. Thank you.
That's a good question. I don't know. I do know that every time I go to my local post office here, there are signs up everywhere saying we're hiring. So I don't know if their pay and benefit package hasn't kept up with inflation, but it does appear, and I have sort of heard anecdotally that they're hurting for bodies. So we all know when you're short on employees, you sometimes will lower your standards, and you take, we see that also with the US military. We've seen some people, the military was always such a respected and um, vaunted job, and now we're seeing these terrorist attacks committed by people that either currently are or that just recently got out of the military. So I think it's an unfortunate product of less and less people um, either taking these jobs or treating the job with the respect that it should be attached to it.
Yeah, it is a sad state of affairs, but as you said, most of them are honest, but those few that are not are really making some big problems.
Yeah, in this article I was reading, it was interesting. The Inspector General and the auditors suggested a series of improvements, including more training of employees, stronger national policy banning personal items from inside the facilities, and updating some of the 18,619 cameras in plants throughout the nation, many of them that no longer work. So, again, I think you see the issue of budget there where, I'm no expert on the Postal Service, but they've been losing money for so long.
Right.
They've had to be, allocated more federal funds to complete their mission, that probably a lot of these security things, surveillance cameras and different security trainings and stuff like that, has gone by the wayside just so they can complete their primary mission of, getting the mail out. So it's unfortunate, but it is something that people need to be aware of. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about some suggestions for our
Yeah, that's
listeners.
what I was wondering. So how do you avoid that? Just avoid the mail altogether?
Well, I think, none of us can avoid the mail completely. And I think in general, I mean, I think we're very lucky to have a system that for, what is it, about 70 cents, you can have a letter taken from Santa Barbara, California to Boston, Massachusetts. I mean, I can't get in my car and drive that over to Massachusetts for 73 cents. So, it's still a good program, but there's things you can do to keep yourself safe. Probably one of the easiest things that I would suggest, and I've started doing, noting that we're actually investigating some local cases here of mail theft. Two of my partners at the DA's office are working with the postal inspectors locally because we've had a rash of business checks stolen from some of the local Santa Barbara post offices, or the belief is that they were stolen somehow out of the mail because all the victims mailed these checks and then they ended up getting stolen, rewritten for different amounts and deposited into different, suspect accounts throughout the United States. So like I said, our office is trying to work a joint investigation with the US Postal Inspector's office to track down some of that stuff. But so knowing that, kind of being one of my partners that I share an office with, she's one of the investigators working that. So knowing that, I've switched from anytime I have to send a check out, you know, you have those window envelopes that come with business checks, right? So you can write the business check off of your printer, and then the name and address are in that area that shows up in the window, and your return address is up there in that window on the right. And you can purchase the envelopes that have those clear pieces of thin plastic so that you don't have to address the envelope again. It's already written on the check. I think most people are familiar with those, and so I've stopped using those types of envelopes, and I just put, if I have to send checks out through the mail, I just put them in a nondescript, white envelope, so that at least, it's not as obvious to the thieves that may be sorting the mail, or even, when the mail gets out to the mailbox where it's going, or anywhere in transit, it's not as obvious that it's a check. So I think that's, one way to, protect yourself. The Postal Service, they make a few recommendations. If you suspect your mail was stolen, you can contact the US Postal Inspectors. Their phone number is 877-876-2455. That's 877-876-2455. And their website is USPSOIG.gov. So that would be the initials for the US Postal Service, and then OIG would be Office of the Inspector General. So USPSOIG.gov, and that's their website where you could also report any theft crimes that you've been a victim of, and then that would get routed to a postal inspector. You can also go to your local post office and file a complaint, and then it would get routed to the appropriate inspectors. Another really cool system, and I know I was just talking about my partner who is investigating the mail thefts. She was explaining to me that she signed up for a system or a option called informed delivery. And I'm not sure if, and Christina or any of your other guests have talked about that before. Is that something you guys have talked about?
We haven't talked about it, but I have it, and I get notified what mail is coming. So
yeah, it's great. It's a free service, and it sends you an email early each morning showing the photographs of each piece of mail that are going to be delivered to your house or to your PO box that day. So a great way to know very quickly if you've been the victim of some sort of mailbox theft, or possibly the picture was taken before another sorter got their hands on it. So anyway, a great resource there. Again, it's free. And all you need is your email and the information on your delivery address, and they'll send you an email each morning. And like I said, my partner uses it and she loves it. It has helped her deal with some issues that came up through the mail. So, and again, you mentioned it at the top of our show. People these days, they say it is much safer to mail your items inside the post office instead of using the blue collection boxes. I don't know how much of that mailbox phishing still goes on, but again, if you have the opportunity and can take that extra step of, going to the actual post office and dropping it in the slot, you're eliminating one or two spots along the way where it could get intercepted. And then the last one is kind of obvious, but if you haven't already considered it, consider paying your bills through online banking rather than mailed checks. I know that most of us do these days, pay our bills online. And, again, it seems like everything we talk about has a possible scam to it, that those systems can also be compromised, but it is one way to keep a paper check from being compromised if you're paying that bill with your checking account via an ACH or something like that.
Yeah, and I suppose, Greg, is in addition to the envelopes with the window, you probably should not even use the self-addressed envelopes to pay some of these bills, because that's kind of an obvious giveaway too for some of these businesses.
Yeah, the return envelopes that you get, and again, it creates a lot of steps for people to protect themselves, and it's really, how much effort do you want to go to? It's super convenient to use the payment envelope that your credit card sends you, and it's pre-addressed, and oftentimes, not with credit cards, but with some things, you get a pre-addressed envelope and you don't even have to put a stamp on it. It's paid for.
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
So yeah, I think the most important thing is for people to be aware of these things and do everything that they can to be safe, and then, this kind of dovetails into another one of those things that we probably talk about, a couple times a month on this show. And you just have to be diligent. You need to check your credit card statements to see if there's fraud. But you also need to be, you should be balancing your checkbook every month when you get your statements and reviewing the checks that are clearing to confirm that, the check was cashed by the person that you sent it to, and it was cashed for the same amount that you wrote on that check. Because
Yeah.
these days you get a image of the checks. The banks are good about scanning them, and usually with your
Mm-hmm.
statement, or either your online or your paper statement, you get a PDF image of that check. So you should be looking at those and confirming that
Yeah.
you wrote that
That
check.
was our big warning when we had Montecito Bank and Trust on last time, because they said what so many people do is they see that the right amount cleared their checkbook. Then they don't take that additional step to look at the picture of the check or to see if it was actually who they wrote it to that cashed the check.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's taking so long sometimes for them to notify, the bank or the police or whoever they want to notify that their check has been misrouted.
Yeah, that they're actually one of the main reporting parties that helped us open this investigation that my two partners are working on. They were getting a ton of fraud reports through Montecito Bank and Trust, and they realized that there was probably a connection to the mail, and so they, reported it to us, and that's so maybe we can talk to them next week a little more about
Yeah.
how they figured it
Mm-hmm.
out. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Sounds good.
they were one of our main tipsters that got us going on that investigation.
Sounds good. So that's really good advice about the mail and checking on your checks. Anything else for us today, Greg?
Yeah, I'd love to touch on something that came across. I won't even say my desk. It was a frantic phone call from a local bank last week, telling me that they had an elderly female in one of their branches wanting to wire $450,000 to someone, and the branch manager and the employees at the bank did an outstanding job of delaying the lady and trying to explain to her that this was most likely a scam. And through a little more of their due diligence, they figured out it was a romance scam. And this, so I actually went out and met with this lady at one of our local retirement homes. And, I tried to convince her it was a scam. And I'm not sure I actually got through to her. It's a very interesting and sad case. I was able to get a hold of some family members who were going to take up the charge and try and, keep this transfer from going through. But what I wanted to hit back on was something that I talked about last week with Judy, and that is how important it is for people to stay in touch with their isolated friends and family. When you have people, especially as they get older, and maybe their social circles start to get smaller, their time out of their apartment or their house or their wherever they're living, the time out and about with people gets less. These people get very susceptible to not only scams, but these friendships slash romance scams in general, because you have people, yearning for that human contact and that sort of desire for acceptance and, um, maybe love or, whatever it might be. And so I can't stress enough how important it is if you've got, parents or aunts or uncles or grandparents or anybody like that, that you can stay in close contact with and, be interested in, not only their life, but, you know, gently inquire as to what they do when they're on the internet. Who do they converse with? Who do they email with? You know, all of those things are going to help, you protect the older folks that can be so susceptible to these scams.
Yeah, well, that's really great advice. And it's sad that so many people must be lonely. And I think the prevalence of the romance scams definitely shows that. There is an organization in Santa Barbara called the Center for Successful Aging, and they do have phone calls phone callers who are seniors themselves, and you can sign up to get a call. And I think they check in on certain elderly people every day. So I'll find out the phone number and put it on the YouTube version. But again, it's in Santa Barbara, and it's the Center for Successful Aging.
Well, that's a great tip. Thanks. I hadn't heard of that.
Yeah.
I will put that in my back pocket.
Okay. All right. Well, gosh, great advice today. Are we done? Is there anything else you have to tell us?
Well, Tina always wants me to finish with good news, and I found an article where the U.S. Department of the U.S. Department of Justice has recently charged a dual Russian-Israeli citizen. I believe the charges were brought in New Jersey, and he was arrested in Israel. But he was running a ransomware product called Lockbit, and not really surprisingly, it had been I think I started in 2019. It was a ransomware program that targeted over 2,500 entities in 120 countries and amassed at least $500 million in ransom payments. Oftentimes these, ransomware attacks don't generally target individual citizens that, might be listening to our podcast, but, people need to be aware that these ransomware attacks to bigger, hospitals, banks, cellular phone companies, anybody that are the big, huge storers of data, even though the ransomware attack, you or me might not be the exact victim of the ransomware, might not have to pay to get our data back. That means our data has been compromised. So, taking out these ransomware hackers is always good news. A global law enforcement effort. They dubbed their investigation Operation Kronos, and it dismantled the group's infrastructure in February 2024. But the remnants of its network still remain a concern. So, and like we always say in law enforcement, you arrest one, there's usually two more out behind them to take their place. So, just a little bit of good news. It's there's a lot of work for us in law enforcement to do, but there is a lot of good work being done, and doing our best to protect people on the scam and internet fraud front. So every little bit helps.
We appreciate it. Thank you so much for all the tips today. Really appreciate it, and look forward to talking to you next week.
Great. Have a great week.
You too.
Thanks.